Chapter 5. There are worse ways to spend a day than chugging down the river, even if you are curled up on an anchor chain stowing away on a police launch. After his early start and a long walk that morning, Charlie was tired, so he ate an apple, peered out at the view of the city as it floated past, and dropped off to sleep on a canvas sack. Unfortunately, Charlie was still asleep when the river policeman docked at Greenwich, and asleep when he went for his lunch, and when he came back, and still asleep when he pulled away and headed his boat down the river to Silvertown. Charlie was woken up by the shuddering of the boat starting off, and a scrabbly, scratchy thing running over his foot. "Yow!" he yelped, sitting up hurriedly, before remembering he was in a low locker in the bows, and the ceiling was about 2 feet high. He hit his head sharply. "Yow!" he yelped again, tears springing to his eyes, and he lay back down awkwardly. A sneaky-looking black rat, presumably the scratchy, scrabbly thing that had just run over his foot, was looking at him with an expression of disdain. The cabin was dim. What light there was coming in from the west. The position of the sun and his own growling stomach told him it was certainly past lunchtime. "Oh, no," Charlie whispered, remembering not to yelp now, as the policeman would still be in the boat. "Where are we? What am I going to do, Rat?" The rat gave him a look which clearly said, "What do I care?" and slipped out through the anchor hole and down into the murky water below. "Oh," said Charlie, "I thought you were nice. Well, there you go." He lay back on the knobbly anchor chain, being as quiet as he could, wondering if anything good would ever happen to him. Well, he thought, we're still heading east, i.e. out to sea, and that's where the cats said Mum and Dad were being taken, so that's all right. But now I've missed the chance to meet the Greenwich cats and hear if they have any more news. He wondered if he should try to slip overboard like the rat and swim ashore, or if he should push the river police guy overboard and steer the boat back to Greenwich. No, stupid ideas. He had to be sensible. The problem with having to be sensible is that if you think about it too much, soon nothing seems sensible, and this is what was happening to Charlie right now. Within a few minutes it seemed to him that he had been stupid to leave Raffy's, daft to take the cat's advice, idiotic to sleep all day, half-witted to think he could just set off to sea and expect to find his parents. The sea is huge. The brown cat had said France. France is huge. How many ports are there on the Channel coast? Hundreds. Why on earth had he thought that this was a good way to try and find them? Charlie was a boy who liked to do things, to act. Stuck in that anchor chain locker, unable to do anything, his misery seemed about to overwhelm him. But then he heard a most peculiar noise. It was music. Loud and raucous music, but not ugly. No, it was wild and exciting, pulsing like drums and wailing like violins, although it wasn't either of those. There was a sound he half recognised, but couldn't put a name to, a whistling, pumping sound with a swirling melody, like all the things he'd ever wanted to do but couldn't. Like adventure and danger and strange, interesting people. Like long ago and far away. His heart immediately began to beat faster, and he slid out of the locker into the boat's little cabin without even thinking about the river police guy. As it turned out, it didn't matter whether Charlie thought about him or not, because the river police guy was busy doing his job. He was up against the railings of his little boat with a megaphone, addressing the ship alongside them, saying, "You are breaking the rules! You are causing a nuisance! Under waterway by rule 1783ZX brackets 1 brackets, you are not permitted to play music on a public waterway without a licence. Unless you produce a valid licence within 5 minutes, I am obliged to board your vessel and prevent further nuisance being caused. You are under a warning. You are breaking the rules," and so on. But Charlie took no notice of that at all. He was too busy gazing at the extraordinary ship before him. For a start, she was huge, a great, tall, wide, old-fashioned steamer. And not only was she huge, she was crimson. Not a soppy dolly pink, but crimson like blood, like the sun going down on a burning African night, like red oranges and garnets and pomegranate seeds. And where she wasn't crimson, she was gold. The hair of her gorgeous carved figurehead, for example, with its green eyes and sidelong inviting smile, and the carved rims of her many portholes, and the curled leaves and the vines carved all over her magnificent stern. She had 3 masts, a bowsprit, cannons and lifeboats along the decks, and 2 fine funnels amidships, from which sprang puffs of black smoke. In front of the funnels was a low circular canvas awning in crimson and white stripes like seaside rock, and gay flags fluttered in her rigging. She was heading out to sea under power, catching the ebb tide, but her sails were not up yet. Charlie suddenly wanted more than anything to see this amazing craft under canvas, bowling along on the high seas. The wild music was coming from this ship, and it seemed that neither the ship nor her music cared about the pesky river police guy any more than an elephant cares about a fly on its bottom. He kept on bawling through his megaphone, and the ship kept on moving downstream. And then suddenly a figure appeared on the deck and seemed to notice the police guy, for it leaned over the side as if listening to hear what he was saying, and then disappeared for a moment and then reappeared, casting down a rope ladder from the deck and making beckoning motions. The ship slowed a little to stabilise in the flowing stream of the river, and the police guy manoeuvred his little boat up to the great crimson hull. He made fast to the bottom of the ladder and began to climb up. Charlie, watching for his opportunity, knew exactly what he was going to do. The moment the coast was clear, he was going to board this ship. It was so beautiful, so exciting. What kind of people could be on board? Who would own such a vessel? He had never seen anything so tempting in his life, and he had to find out about it. Something was going on up on the deck. He couldn't see clearly because the little riverboat was hoiked up against the ship's crimson side, and the deck was way above him. But he could hear shouting and scuffling, and suddenly a great splash. He looked to where the sound had been, and there was the river police guy, closer to the river than he would have cared to be, i.e., in it. He was splashing and struggling and trying to catch his breath and right himself, which is hard with your boots on when you've been thrown overboard. "Sorry, fella," came a hoarse cry from overhead, and then the tempo of the ship picked up extremely. The music suddenly stopped, and the ship began to cruise swiftly like a fighting swan on down the river, leaving the river police guy in its wake and pulling his little boat along beside her almost as if it had been completely forgotten, which perhaps it had. Charlie, sitting alone in the little boat's cabin, being dragged at considerable speed to who knows where, couldn't say a word. Several miles upstream, Raffi and Troy were standing by Mr. Ubsworth's stall on the riverside. Troy was panting and drooling. He'd run all the way, following Charlie's scent. Raffi had followed him in the long silver car and was looking cool and pale. He was staring at Troy, his lip twisted. "You stupid animal," he said, quite calmly to start with. "You stupid animal. This is not the kid. It's a fish stall. Didn't you get a decent sniff of him yesterday in the car? What do you think I feed you for, you placket? It's not for the charm of your company, it's for your nose. And if your nose can't tell the difference between a boy and a plate of fish, you're not worth your keep, are you? So pig off. Go on." He picked up a stick and jerked it in his face. Troy, whining, his tongue flobbering, went to the edge of the water and ran up and down. Mr. Ubsworth observed and said nothing. "You've been here all morning," Raffi said to him. "Aye," said Mr. Ubsworth, rinsing a sparrow fish in his bucket. "You see a boy, brown boy, shave head about so high with a bag?" Mr. Ubsworth looked up. "No," he said mildly. "You're the first boy I've seen today." Raffi stared at him. He didn't like being called a boy. "If he comes back this way," he said. Mr. Ubsworth was back in his fish's bellies, cleaning out red and blue innards from silvery streaks of eel in the cold water. The heat from his grill shimmered on the air. "Grilled eel sandwich," he said. "Course not," said Raffi. "If he comes back." "Ain't been no boy here," said Mr. Ubsworth again. Raffi stood for a moment, his head down. He was angry. Suddenly he threw the stick viciously at his dog, and then turned on his heel, his jacket flying. He jumped in the car and went home. Troy lolloped off tiredly after the car, his tail down. It was a long way home. Mr. Ubsworth looked up. He liked lads to have better manners. Poor Troy. He doesn't deserve that, does he? He told him exactly where Charlie had been. He just didn't follow him too far. See you next time.